here we have our next speaker who has more than 7 years of experience building front ends, and lately he has been building AI tools, right? A little about him: he spotted a black panther while trekking. If you would want to talk about that, that's strange, but cool. He
When I
treats
first got to know Black Panther, right, I thought, okay, while trekking, he's watching the movie Black
Black
Panther.
Panther, yeah. And then we had to tell him, no, it's a Black Panther. Maybe he
Yeah,
saw it in
that's
Kabini or
yeah,
I don't know where.
that's how Gen Z I am.
Yeah. But yeah, he treats cooking like meditation, and he genuinely loves tax law enough to legally save money the government wishes he wouldn't do. Right. So please welcome on stage, talking about performing large scale migrations with AI, Rishabh Bhattacharya, guys.
Hello, am I audible, guys? All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rishabh Bhattacharya. About the Black Panther. So, I was trekking in Mussoorie, and there's a national park. I didn't know that it was a national park, and I was still trekking between it. And while it was very late and just before sundown, I was supposed to reach a point, and I was trekking alone, and I wanted to reach as fast as possible because I knew that it's a jungle, so there will be like wildlife over there. So based on that, I was able to, like, just 100 meters front of me, I saw the Black Panther, and I was like quite shocked, and I hid. That's what humans do. I was scared. So yeah, enough of that conversation. Good afternoon, and everyone over here. Today I will be speaking about performing large-scale migrations or modernization with AI. So I think Apurv really set the tone about how to utilize AI and what are the concepts of AI. Nattu did give us like a reality check over here. So what I wanted to bring forward over here is how we could utilize AI to perform something which gives you real-time output, and that's what I was able to achieve. So the presentation outline over here talks about, like, what do you need to perform a large-scale migration. Creating context, definitely role of test cases, which we have over here. Creating prompts. This is a little bit outdated, so I would go with skills right now, or agentic workflows, and then creating skills, and at the very end we'll have a little bit of question answers. So what's the problem statement, right? We all are working in large enterprise platforms and everything. We are utilizing like React, even React code, which would be in like React 16 or 14. I don't know. Like that's one of the biggest problem which we have with legacy code. And we definitely want to migrate, but there is a timeline issue. They're like, hey, how do I prioritize? Our product managers would come like, is migrating from legacy code to modernized code should be the priority, or should it be like to release this particular feature which we need? So we have to think about, right? So as an engineer, my point should be like, hey, the legacy code has security issues. You have to think about that. It's not like that, okay, you just give it and it takes care of it. No, it doesn't happen, because the end consumer doesn't know about the security risk which lies with legacy code, and that's where we are trying to solve over here. But we also try to solve it a little bit faster than how traditionally it used to do. So traditionally we have like so traditionally when we are creating any like, if you break down the entire process of migration, it's into three different parts. One is the analysis, the next is the code migration, and then the verification that everything is working fine. So if I take a like rough estimate. Analysis usually takes around 40% of your time. Like either the business analyst is doing the work for you and then kind of like coming back. If you take that time into accommodation over here, it's a huge amount of time. Number two is the code generation. You know how the code looks like, but you want to make sure that the code gets generated correctly. So that's number two. And number three is the verification. As Natu and Apurv did say, we shouldn't rely on AI like 100%. It does generate you the code like for 80% around accuracy. But how do we make sure that that 80% turns out to 90% and then 95 and 100? So how do we reduce that gap over here? So we come into the first problem statement of the business gap. Okay, so we talk about the business gap over here, and if you see the analysis over here, it works like the business analyst like goes through your entire application, finds like, hey, this is what's happening, this is what's going to generate, and that's the output which would be generated out over here. But the same transformation was already present in your legacy code. All right. So what we need is like a deep dive context of your entire application into something which is like could be utilized by the agent. That's step one over here. How do we do that? Number one, we go with structure, which is the dependency graph. And by dependency graph over here, I don't mean by the package JSON dependency graph over like what's going on. It's similar to that, but more of your code wise. Where does what lie? You can create it manually, like you can ask the agent that, hey, go through my code and generate it individually, like folder by folder, a README file. That's what it's needed in your project right now. If you're facing any legacy code, that's what you need. A README file which explains what does this particular code mean and what does it do. Number two, what you could also utilize is simple skill/MCP server, what I would say called Graphify. Graphify kind of like allows you to connect through your entire code base. It uses graph plus kind of like a RAG in your local and kind of like creates an entire dependence like graph based application where you could see like this particular method is calling this particular method and you can connect through entire code base very easily. So it kind of like solves the problem of the entire. So when you're migrating from, let's say, function A to, which is in, let's say, PHP or React 17 to React 19, you want to make sure that that function A is also transformed to React 19 function A, but in React 19's own business logic there. So Graphify solves that problem very easily. You could utilize that. And as I said, you could utilize the agent.md file where you can create like a tree-like structure of agent.md. By tree-like structure of agent.md over here, what I mean is you will have a root level agent.md file, which kind of like connects to your module level agent.md files. Why do we go in that direction? Is when the model takes the agent.md and start like performing the action, if you put everything, let's say entire migration level context or instructions, what I would mean as instructions into your agent.md file, it would be too much. Like, like it would cross like even the 1 million token context token, which is provided by very large models, right? It will surpass that. So how do we achieve with like very small models like Qwen still be able to achieve our outputs like without any problem? is distributed systems of your agent.md files as well as your readme.md files. In that way, whenever that particular context is needed, it kind of like pulls in and then utilizes and performs this action. And also the instructions which is needed to perform the action. So once we have the agent.md file, that kind of like solves your business logic as well, because it kind of like has the instructions for your what your business logic is doing, and also the target standards as well. Like when you are transforming, when you're creating that root level agent.md file, you have the like standards set over there that, hey, I want to move from React 17 to React 19. Like these are the guidelines over here. Make sure that you follow these things. You could also utilize like skills, which we'll talk about in a minute over here. And coming to the next step, which is like test cases. Who loves to write test cases? So can we get a hand raise? So yeah, I do hate it, but I have to write it. Like TDD is one of the good way of maintaining it. But test cases are very much important when you are doing a like legacy migration or like any migrations which you are doing. It kind of gives you that baseline. Like Apurv talked about test cases, and I was like, hey, I'm able to connect why he's kind of like pointing that point over there. Test cases are very much the bedrock or the foundation on which you can migrate your code. If that's missing, that's the very biggest missing point over there. So my suggestion is like for the missing over here, you could kind of like create or accommodate an agent in the agentic workflow which you will develop. You kind of like accommodate a which would do a TDD, but more of like, hey, first do the legacy TDD, then see everything is working over there or not, and then kind of like transform everything to here in my new like modernized code. And then you then perform the action over here of like migrating the code from the legacy to the new modernized code. In that way, you are able to at least identify and perform a like somewhat a basic level of TDD over there, and not be of a blindsided like, hey, this particular case may have got missed. So you add that first and then only proceed for your migrations. And test cases are very much important. Like that's, as I said, it's the bedrock for your migrations. Creating prompts. So I've moved away from this, but you could still utilize it when you are doing a very small like migration. It doesn't have to like. Why I have moved away? Because I'm trying to do like large scale migration where like a very big application you are trying to move out. Prompts do tend to like slow you down. So that's where your move should be either prompts for a very small migration, or agentic workflow where you are doing a continuous, when you're running the agent workflow continuously 24/7. And you just give a end goal, like Natu said, that, hey, this is the goal, migrated from this code to this modernized code over there. That's how you will achieve the fast outputs over there. So prompts does give us like the opportunity and like how to keep it structured. I would not go in structure wise because Apurv did a good job in explaining the structure as well. But I would suggest like, hey, utilize the prompt templates when you are performing the actions for your for a very small application. But when you're going for a large application, do utilize the agentic workflow over there. So this is the kind of like a map which a prompt structure which would usually have. The context injection, be it a prompt or an agent which you are developing, Context injection is very much important. You don't want to add the entire, as I said, you don't want to add the entire project's context at one time. You would like to cherry pick it and get one at a time. So that's why this context injection is very much important, and that kind of like drives your output as well, like how accurate your output is getting generated. And if you're using, let's say, Copilot, I saw there like around 20 or 30% were using Copilot. If you're using Copilot, some of the models over there are like limited to just 200,000 tokens itself. You can't go beyond that. So you have to think about that as well and build, when you're building the agent or the prompt, you have to, as I was saying, that make sure that you are giving a dependency structure-wise README files and the context files, so that it kind of like fetches only what is needed. It will fetch the first README file, which will have the like tree-like structure. Okay, this particular file will have this particular answer, and then get it. Guardrails is where the test cases and things comes into picture. And also, like if you would like to provide, like, hey, before even going for a commit, do, let's say, playwright test integration test cases, make sure that my application is working in the particular way which I wanted, and then kind of like move ahead and then perform the actions. Chain of thoughts, the patterns is also where it kind of like you are reassuring or improving your agent or the prompt better and more and better. In the first shot, when you will create that prompt file or the agent file, I'm pretty much sure it will not give you the corrected output or what you desired output which you have. There will be problems. You'll see that, hey, there is this particular pattern which is not being followed, or this particular thing is not getting converted correctly. So that's why the patterns or few short examples are very much important. It allows the AI to know that, hey, whenever I come in this particular scenario, I would have to do this particular thing over here, so that AI knows what needs to be done, and you don't have to like inform the AI, hey, you did it wrong over here. Previously, you did it correctly over here. So that's where the few short examples kind of like helps you out. Chain of thoughts, again, it allows you to have like a checklist. It's always better to have a checklist of like when you're performing actions. If you just give an agent like a blob of text and not provide like, hey, make sure that you run integration test case, make sure that you build it, make sure that you test it, make sure that these particular cases are passing, and then perform the action. Those checklists are very much important when you're writing a prompt file or an agent file over there. And that's what the agent will use when it's performing the action. So make sure that you utilize the chain of thoughts to channelize the outcome of the agent or the prompt. perform and confirm, like, hey, whatever the code has been generated, is the previous, like the test cases which we wrote, is it working or not, or what's going on over there? And also the new test cases which we wrote over here, is it correctly working or not? And if something is not working, I don't want me to kind of like direct it. So make sure that you revise the code which is being like wherever the gaps are getting found, and at the very end commit the finalized code. So we want this to be very smooth and one single workflow to be done. Coming to this, make sure that when you are doing this, and for the first time, as I said, it won't be as perfect as you are thinking about right now. Put human in the loop in every gate over here, and slowly you reduce that gate when you're producing the outcome slowly and steadily. This would help you achieve in a longer term the things which you want to do. And human in the loop definitely helps in the starting, let's say, 30% of the times. And then it kind of like automates and gets things out. I do have some time, and I could showcase like an agent which I created over here for the. So I do utilize OpenCode. It's an open source coding agent. Oh, okay. One second. And I'm a Real Madrid fan, so any Barca fans, get out. Yeah. Oh, I may have to mirror right now because I want to showcase. So change and start mirroring. All right. So what we see here is a code migrator agent, and I would also showcase you how does the migrator agent look like. So this is the orchestrator over here, and if you see in particular, it's a very plain text, and OpenCode allows you to if you don't have that knowledge about how to write ADK applications and everything, you can replicate the same thing in ADK as well. Okay, but it's very low code, no code like way of doing the output over here. You just write, and like what it does is like more of a delegation, the orchestrator. It delegates the over here into phase 1 of the application, which is the migration analyzer. Sorry. Then comes to the gap reporter, and it kind of like works as a workflow. It's like first performs the migration analyzer, then goes for gap reporter. Then the migration executor, validator, reviser, committer, as we talked about, right? And if you see a little bit down, revise loop is also present. Like, hey, if something is not working, then do perform this particular action over here, so that we can keep on going ahead and perform the actions. There are few guardrails, like, hey, make sure that the secret data and the PII data, whatever we are storing, let's say, sometimes we mistakenly store the tokens or in our environment files, right? We don't want that to be passed on to the agent context. So make sure that you don't take those artifacts as well. And what happens in runtime is that, and what I love about OpenCode is this particular section, which is the permission section. It allows me to provide the necessary guidelines and tasks which you want the agent to perform. You could say like, hey, edit right now is in deny mode, so orchestrator can't do the edit. Only the executor can do edit. So if I move there, edit is allowed right now. So right now with this, I could like again provide like, hey, but this particular folder you can provide. Right now it's like all, like it can edit the entire project. But if you want just the scope of it, you could keep that and give that particular folder like path and it performs the action in that particular path itself. And if you see here, like I'm asking it to, because it's like execution over here, I don't want it to ask me questions again. The asking question is for the analyzer and the gap reporter part. So that's where in the analyzer and the gap, one second, why it says there. Gap reporter should have that. Okay, it made a mistake. So I used AI, so it did make a mistake. So I can blame it. So I'm not the one who is writing it. Yeah. So, but yeah, let's say I would ask the reporter and the analyzer to kind of like ask me questions, no matter what, so that it kind of like you can check it out and see how it runs. And I don't have any legacy code right now. If someone wants to test this out, you can test it out in your system. I will be posting this in my GitHub repository, the public one. And one second. Where did that screen go? Yeah. So if you want to reach out to me, please, you can. This is my LinkedIn QR scanner. I'm only present in LinkedIn. I'm not in any other social media. Please don't ask me why. But yeah, I will definitely. It does have my GitHub's repository link. So. Where I have published the skill and the agentic workflow. If you have any questions, I will be outside. Please feel free to reach out to me and ask the questions. Thank you so much, everyone.